Good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum, students. Uh, okay, let's start today's lesson. So, our today's topic under discussion is public and private limited company. Before we discuss that, let me give you a quick recap that what we discussed in the last class. We discussed limited companies, and in particular, we talked about the formation of limited companies, how they are formed, and who are the people who manage them. We discussed that the board of directors are the people who actually manage the business, and the owners, they have no role in the management of limited companies, and those owners are called shareholders. And limited companies, they raise their finance if they require a certain amount of capital. They, for that, they issue shares. So people who buy shares, they become the shareholders, and their money is used by the company for their business activity. Okay, so we talked about all this. Okay, now we'll talk about the two types of limited companies, public and private limited companies. To start with, you need to understand why the word public is there and why the word private is there with the other type of limited company. And generally, there is a misconception about this term, because students feel that because the word public is there alongside public limited company, so it must be operating in a public sector. And you know that when a business operates in a public sector, it means it is controlled, owned, and managed by the government. So here, in fact, it's not the case. Public limited companies are in the private sector, because we are discussing those types of businesses which are in the private sector, right? So public limited companies, they do operate in the private sector. So why the word public is there and what does it mean? Basically, public limited company, they are able to issue their shares in the stock exchange. And stock exchange is basically a market where shares are bought and sold, right? And we did discuss that what are shares or what is a share. I told you share is a piece of paper or a certificate which actually shows that the person who is holding it is the owner of that company, because the person has bought certain amount of shares of that company, and the value of the shares and the amount of shares is written on that certificate. So that shows a part ownership of that person holding that certificate in the company. All right, so public limited companies, they issue their shares through stock exchange, and stock exchange is a market where many people come. Okay, so anybody can buy shares of that company from the stock market or the stock exchange, right? So the word public is there because invitation is to general public, right? Anybody can buy. So that is why, because anybody from general public can buy it from the stock exchange, and there is no restriction. So that is why the word public is there. Remember. Whereas if I talk about private limited companies, they are not allowed to sell their shares in the stock exchange. That is the problem. And when they are not able to sell their shares in the stock exchange, they have to find their own links, and that could be that they try to sell their shares through their friends and family members. I'll talk about it later, but that is the major difference as far as the name is concerned. So private limited companies, they actually sell their shares through their private connections rather than selling it to general public. Now, okay, let's now discuss the various points which I actually mentioned of differences between public and private limited companies. Let me show you. Here we go. Yeah, these are the points of differences between a private limited company and a public limited company. So the first point is private limited companies, they can issue limited amount of shares, and there is actually a restriction. They cannot go beyond that level. So that means that the size of the private limited company will be small, okay, compared to a public limited company. Why? Because in public limited company, unlimited shares can be issued. So there will be unlimited shareholders, okay. But in private limited company, there are limited shareholders. That is why, because in public limited company there is unlimited capital, you can issue as many shares you want. So that is why it is basically larger than private limited company. This is one point of difference. Second is original owners may not lose control. Now, original owners, you know that the people who start the company, who actually fulfill all the basic legal requirements to form a company, and there are different documents they have to submit it to the registrar, and registrar is a person who basically registers the companies, the names of the companies and the other particulars the companies have. So original owners are the people who actually start the company. Now, who is a registrar? Um, Actually, is a government official who actually gets the name of the companies registered. And registration is very important because once you get it registered, now nobody else can use that brand name or you can use the name of the company, right? For example, if you know that Coca-Cola is there for more than 100 years and they have got their name registered, they have got their brand name registered as well. And that is why you see the letter R on the packaging of the products. And R is for registered, or sometimes there is actually letters T and M, that is trademark. Again, they got it registered so that nobody else can use it. Because if you won't get it registered, maybe some other business will start using the same name, okay. And if they get it registered, you have to change your name. Then it becomes their legal right to use that name. So imagine Coca-Cola, for example, if their name is unregistered, for example, or their brand names are unregistered, and now if somebody else uses the same name and gets it registered, now the original Coca-Cola company has to change its name. But actually this is not the case. But if it would have happened, then it's the original Coca-Cola company who would have to change their name. So that is why it's crucial to get the name of your company registered and inform the registrar about every single detail about the company, like the nature of the business, the total amount of capital they'll obtain by issuing shares, the detail of the directors and all that. We'll discuss that later. But so that is the responsibility of the original owner. So they do not, so when they lose control, it means, when we say that they lose control, it means that they cannot manage the business. They cannot take part in any of the activity which is linked with managing the business, or in that case, the company, right? So original owners, why they do not lose control? The reason is because you know that board of directors are elected in an annual general meeting where votes um, are cast by the shareholders, right, in favor of the candidates which are there for the post of board of directors, right? And I told you earlier in the previous class as well that voting power of each shareholder depends on the number of shares held by each shareholder. For example, if one shareholder is holding 20% of the shares of the total shares which are issued by the company, right? So when that person will cast one vote, it will be assumed that 20% of the shareholders have voted for in favor of that particular person. So it means that voting power depends on the amount of investment the person has made in the company. So what happens that in private limited company, because the number of shares are limited, so original owners, they are able to buy majority of the shares, like more than 50%. So when they do that, what happens in the annual general meeting? They vote in favor of themselves. If there is one original owner or more than one original owner, what do? They actually vote in favor of themselves, or he or she vote in favor of himself or herself. Now, obviously, when he or she casts one vote, obviously it will be assumed that more than 50% shares have now they are in favor of that original owner, right? So now the other shareholders, they cannot stop that person to become the board of director. Reason is because if the rest of the shareholders, let's say, they do not vote in favor of that person, still that person, that shareholder, that original owner will become the board of director. Reason is because 51% voting power belongs to that person, let's say, or 52% or 60%. Now, obviously, the rest of the shares will be 49%, the voting power, or maybe 48%, 47%, 40%, right? So, obviously, the rest of the shareholders, they cannot stop that original owner to become board of director. So, in that way, original owners, they do not lose control. So, they hold two offices. One, they are the board of directors, and they are the shareholders as well. So, they get salary as well, because board of directors are the employees of the business. Although they actually are at the top level of management, they rest at the top tier of the management of a company, but they are the employees. They get high salaries, but they are not the owners, and they do not have any share in the profit of the company. Okay, but in a private limited company, what happens, because shareholders become the board of directors as well, who majority shareholders, and they are the original owners, so they have the control as well as the ownership. So they get their share of profit as well, and they get the salary as well. Other shareholders, they might not want this to happen, because they might think that way, that the original owner may be dishonest and may take majority of the profit with himself or herself. But obviously they can't do anything in that case, in case of a private limited company. But in public limited company, there is a divorce between ownership and control. And divorce means separation, and it clearly means ownership belongs to the shareholders, whereas control belongs to the board of directors. And here, original owners, they fail to become board of directors. The reason is, as you can see in point number 1, there are unlimited shares. Okay, so obviously, as a single person, they are not able to, or they do not have the capacity to buy more than 50% shares. Okay, I'll explain you with an example. Let's say a company is having right now 10,000 shares. Okay, 10,000 shares. Okay, now original owner intentionally buys 5,100 shares of that company, and the rest of the shares, original owner sells it to other shareholders or any person who wants to buy it. Now, original owner will have how much holding power, shareholding power? That is 51%. Obviously, that is we calculated this way: 5,100 over 10,000 and into 100. Okay, so I just forgot to do it. This will be into 100, right? So we get 51%. That the owner gets 51% shares, right? Now, what happens that in public owned company, because there is no limit, so companies keep on issuing shares to raise more capital so that they can expand more, and that is the purpose of forming a public limited company. What is the point if you keep a public limited company small? Otherwise, there are other forms of businesses as well, like a private limited company, sole trader, partnership. You form a public limited company just because you want to expand it to a high level. Okay, so you keep on issuing shares, 20,000, 30,000, and okay, even 100,000, right? So when the company reaches 100,000, now imagine the original owner is having how many shares? 5100 shares only, right? So now the shareholding power, although the person is having the same amount of shares, that is 5100, but now the shareholding power has gone down to 5% from 51%, because this is 5100 over 100,000 into 100. Even if that original owner buys more shares, still it's not possible to get back to the original position. That person may be able to uh, have a shareholding power that is 10% or 15% or 20%, but it's not possible to achieve the same position, that is uh, 50, having 51% shares of the company. Why? Because there are unlimited shares and it is not in the capacity of a single person to buy such a huge amount of shares, right? So that is why this happens, that is divorce between ownership and control. And obviously this is a kind of a disadvantage for original owners, because they have started the company but now they cannot take part in the management of the business, but because their purpose is to expand the business, so they do it. Otherwise, if you do not want to lose control, then you should not form a public limited company. But when you start a public limited company, you are aware of it, that this is bound to happen. You are going to lose control of the business. You may start as a board of director, but with the passage of time, when company keeps on issuing shares, you start losing the power, that is the control. And the time comes when you are not the board of director, because in the annual general meeting, the rest of the shareholders, they do not vote in favor of you, because I told you, because of the fear, they do not want any shareholder to become the board of director, because they can be dishonest and they can take majority of the share of the profit, because obviously profit is distributed finally among the shareholders. But because the shareholders, they are completely blind what is happening in the business, it's only in the knowledge of board of directors, okay, because they are actually operating the whole business. So obviously they finally um, just remain the shareholders only, and the board of directors are actually the independent people and they are not the shareholders there. So in simple words, we can say in private limited company, majority shareholders are the board of directors as well, just for the because of the reason I just mentioned. And in public limited company, majority shareholders, or maybe the original owners, they are not the board of directors, because despite of the higher number of shares, still it is not equal to 50% or more than 51% shares, just because there are unlimited shares, I told you earlier. So I think it should be clear to you. Point number 3, sell shares to family and friends. And public limited company, as I told you earlier, when we started the concept, they sell shares in the stock exchange. So now imagine, when you sell shares in the stock exchange, it's a market, okay, and anybody can buy your shares. So there is an advantage as well. When you sell your shares in the market, it will help you to get capital quickly, because it's a market, so there are many buyers who want to buy your shares. So you might be able to generate a large amount of capital, and maybe quicker than private limited company. In private limited company, you are able to sell your shares to family and friends to raise capital. And the reason is, it's not by law that you cannot sell it to any other person who is outside your family or your friends group. No, you can. But the problem is, the reason, what is the reason? Reason is, if you see that the arrow, down arrow, private limited companies cannot advertise their shares legally. They are not allowed by law. So you cannot advertise your shares. How you can tell outside world, how you can tell people outside your family or outside your friends groups that your shares are being offered for sale? Obviously nobody knows about it. So that is why you have to tell your family and friends, okay, that okay, if you know somebody and who is interested in buying shares of a company, please suggest to buy the shares of my company because I'm offering. So this is how you go about it, okay. Even if there is a person who is not part of your family or friends, still you actually access that person through your family or friends. Why? One, because your shares are not listed in the stock exchange. Okay, and the word listing means when your shares are visible to everybody who actually visit the stock market, regardless of whether the person is among your family members or friends or not, right? Because they are visible now. So we said now the shares are listed in the stock exchange. Because private limited company cannot list their shares in the stock exchange, so it's not visible to everybody. And secondly, because they cannot advertise their shares, so again there's a problem. The people outside your family and friends, they cannot come to know about it. So that is why you sell your shares to your family and friends or through them to other people. So that is the only reason that you cannot straight away sell it to your general public, right? Like think about you want to sell your car and you park it outside your house, right? So you can tell your family and friends, okay, my car is for sale, right? If you want to buy, you can, or if you know somebody, refer it to me. Okay, this is the way you do it. But what about the people who are not your, not part of your family and friends? They will never come to know about it that your car is for sale, right? Because you are not advertising it, okay, and there is no way you can tell it to other people, right? So obviously the only way or the means is your family and friends. Okay, and remember, when I say advertisement of shares, it is not about advertisement of products. Private limited companies are able to advertise their products. There is no restriction. Same as the case with public limited company. But the only thing, the only restriction which is there, they cannot advertise their shares, right? So it's not about advertisement of products. Okay, so do not get confused regarding that concept. Although we'll discuss that in the slide to come. Okay, all right. So we have covered the first 3 points. Okay, if you have any question, you can discuss it with me in the next class, or you can send me a message in the WhatsApp group, or when I'll upload this video, you can just write a comment that I have a problem regarding this point, because we have just covered the first 3 points of differences between private limited company and public limited company. So thank you very much. That's all for today. I'll see you in the next class.